together, you're friends, you vacation together, and you're his supervisor. With that, I'll let the gentleman from Utah follow up.
Mr. Chairman, if I can ask unanimous consent to have my clock reset to 5, I believe Mr. Conley was given an extra.
The indulgence is so noted.
Thank you, and I thank the gentleman from Virginia as well for his understanding. And I thank the chairman. Listen, this is important. If we're going to get to the truth, we have to understand. As this nation, we are self-critical. We're going to look deep into these things to make sure they never happen again. So, I've seen the movie Catch Me If You Can. It smells a lot like that. It's unbelievable that somebody could get away with this. I want to go back to that. I want to go back to that invitation and this party. There's a retirement party. Mr. Beale is stepping down. My understanding, Mr. Sullivan, is that Ms. McCarthy was at that retirement party, and she was keenly aware that he was retiring, correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
But he didn't actually retire. He continued on for how much longer on the payroll of the United States government?
A year and a half longer.
And at that time, he was who was his direct report? He reported directly to Ms. McCarthy during that time, correct?
Yes.
Did he show up to work during that time?
No.
Let's put up slide number 2. Slide number 7, pardon me. Slide number 7. This is a letter from Gina McCarthy, who is now the EPA administrator, but prior to that, she had this responsibility for Mr. Beale. The retirement party happened in September of 2011. This is an email that is dated January of 2013. As you're aware, we have been seeking confirmation for your employment status with the other federal agency you maintained you have worked for or are currently working for while employed at the EPA. And later it goes on and says, we've been unable to confirm the existence of an interagency detail or any other type of arrangement. You're familiar with this email, Mr. Sullivan?
Yes, sir, I am.
Let's go to slide number 8. About a month later, this is an email. And the highlight I want to do, it has come to my attention that you are currently receiving a retention bonus in addition to your base salary. As a result, I have notified OARM to cancel payment of the retention bonus. So what happened there? In between, Gina McCarthy, she becomes aware that maybe this is a lie, it's fraud, it's deception, and she sends this.
Mr. Chaffetz, can you tell me the date of that email? I can't read it on the...
It is February 5th.
February 5th. And that was almost a week before we were informed about the situation. We were informed on February 11th of 2012. Excuse me, 2013.
So what did she do about it? Did she tell you about it?
She told us about it on February 11th of 2013.
She didn't tell you about it first, right? She told the General Counsel's office?
That's correct, sir.
So she didn't tell you directly first. She told somebody else about it.
That's correct.
And then it went to another office, correct?
That's correct.
And then it finally landed on your desk.
That is correct.
Did she fire him?
Fire who, Mr. Beale?
Yeah.
No.
So Gina McCarthy knows that it's fraud. He's admitting that he doesn't have any excuse to this. He's basically been outed at this point. And the only thing that she does is get rid of his retention bonus?
Well, sir, with all due respect, I think you mischaracterized that. Ms. McCarthy forwarded her concerns about fraud, and it was our job as criminal investigators to investigate it. During this time period, from February 11th on, we were conducting our criminal investigation. So Ms. McCarthy had her suspicions.
But she had enough to go and say, let's get rid of your retention bonus, because obviously this other agency isn't true. What happened to Mr. Beale? Did he get fired?
No, sir. He retired.
And as a consequence, does he get his full retirement benefits?
Yes, sir, he does.
So here he's prosecuted, convicted, pled guilty, owing hundreds, almost $1 million. He defrauds the federal government. Gina McCarthy knows about this. She only has 3 reports at the time. Mr. Brenner, who has his own ethical problems and challenges, number 2 person, is defrauding the federal government by nearly $1 million, faking his way, saying he's a CIA employee, and she doesn't fire him? And the guy still, month after month, the United States taxpayers are going to pay him for his extraordinary services, and it's based, right, on the highest 3 years of his income, which was fraudulent. It's another example, Mr. Chairman, of this administration, the Obama administration, failing to actually fire somebody. What does it take to actually get fired in this federal government? If this person couldn't be fired and she didn't do it, I think we have no choice but to hear from Administrator McCarthy. She was involved in this. She went to his retirement party. He didn't show up to work for years, and she paid him above what she's allowed to do by the statutory limit, didn't fire him. He still gets his bonus. She needs to come before this committee.
I thank the gentleman. As I go to Ms. Duckworth, I just want to make sure a timeline is accurate. According to what the gentleman just went through, the administrator was aware and was working with the general counsel on the fact that he didn't work for that other agency, in her estimation, before the investigation was given to you. Is that correct? In other words, general counsel came, her awareness, general counsel, and then later you. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, we can follow up on that later. Thank you. The gentlelady from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're here to talk about government accountability today, and this is an incredibly important topic. But I would be remiss not to mention that our government is in shutdown for the first time in nearly 20 years. American veterans, small business owners, and families all across the country are waking up today to news that their government has failed to meet its most basic function. I've been willing to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to make changes to the Affordable Care Act. I even voted against my own party to repeal the Medical Device Act. But the time to have these discussions is not when government is being held hostage. This government shutdown is a disgrace. It's a waste of the American people's time. They are right to be extremely disappointed in us. Our neighbors sent us to Washington to find solutions and not to play politics. And I hope that my colleagues will remember that as we continue this discussion. That's why I am so pleased to be working in a bipartisan way at this hearing today. Like so many of my colleagues, I am outraged at this clear case of abuse in the public trust. At a time when programs critical to the livelihoods of Americans are being slashed, Mr. Beal managed to pocket hundreds of thousands of hardworking taxpayer dollars by making up fantasies and lies. And while this is just one particularly bad apple in an otherwise hardworking, honorable civil service workforce, it seems totally inexcusable to me that the management of this agency failed to catch and stop his fraudulent activity. For an entire decade after he was legitimately authorized to do so, Mr. Beal was able to receive thousands of dollars on autopilot. Mr. Elkins and Mr. Sullivan, I understand that your office are still working on recommendations on how to address this massive management failures at the EPA. Could you share with us your thoughts on the controls that EPA has already started to put into place, and perhaps reflecting what my colleague from Utah was talking about in terms of once a manager finds out or suspects that there is something going on, are they allowed to fire that person right away, or must the investigation process continue, and how has that changed?
Well, first of all, I applaud the actions that EPA is taking to address some of the issues that we've discussed here at this hearing. We will continue to look, as a result of our audit, at what other internal control weaknesses are out there and make recommendations to resolve those internal control weaknesses as they make themselves apparent. In terms of the personnel issues or the regulations that you spoke of, I am not prepared to address specifically, what is allowed and what's not allowed for those, and I don't want to speculate without having, the actual regulations in front of me. I don't want to speculate on that issue.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sullivan, do you think the controls that EPA has already started to put in place are sufficient?
Ma'am, I really don't want to offer an opinion on that. I haven't had a chance to see them being implemented, but I do want to say that we've received complete cooperation during this investigation. So I'm very hopeful, I'm optimistic, but I don't think we've had enough time to see if they're going to work.
Yeah. Mr. Brenner, this vacation home that you co-own in Massachusetts, when did you pay that off? Could you turn your microphone on, please?
Sure. We purchased the home in 1983. 2003 or somewhere around then. And then in later years, in the late 90s, Mr. Beal bought the remainder, my share of the house, from me because this was his family home that they had built together back when he was a teenager, and his plan was to redevelop the house.
Okay, let me.
He bought out my.
I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to cut you off a little bit. So he bought out the time years after you authorized him to get additional pay that he wasn't authorized to get.
First of all,
25% of his salary more than he should have gotten.
I don't think that's accurate that he was not authorized to get it. That we went through a complete process for justifying that increase in pay.
Right, based on him orally saying, "Oh yeah, I have an oral offer of a job offer." So basically, you.
No, I think there was more than that. I remember.
That's not what I'm reading in the investigation here. It says that there's no documentation that he ever had a job offer from another firm. Now, my question is, you helped him get additional money for years, and then he turned around and with that additional income was able to pay you and buy you out of this home that you shared. Don't you think that's an ethical problem that you're facing right now?
Yeah. Actually, what happened at the time was he sold a residence that he had here in the area, and he used the proceeds from that in order to be able to.
And how did he buy that residence? With additional dollars, with the pay that he received, a job that you helped him get, and a job that you helped him get more money than he should have been getting for all this time. Mr. Persepsi, just with my last question, I just want to ask, even if an APA employee has a buddy like Mr. Brenner to help him out, who himself is willing to engage in questionable ethics by accepting handouts from lobbyists, can this continue to happen with the APA today?
For today, there's no one at EPA getting these retention bonuses. Only 28 people have gotten it in the last 20 years. We have put new processes in place, and I agree with the Inspector General that I need to see more of their work to know if I need to do more. But we have not waited, and we've put some new controls in place. It's basically layers of controls that would kick out these things when they're not being. The problem with the Beal activity through the first decade of this century was that it was never kicked out that his retention bonus had expired, and it should have been, and it can't go that way anymore because we now have a hard stop in the system that would pop it out, and it would either have to be recertified with the evidence that you suggested, Congresswoman, or the payments would stop. So that's what would happen today if somebody else got a retention bonus.
Thank you. I'm over my time, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentlelady. The chair will now recognize